Hi, and welcome back to the Relationship School's Smart Couple Podcast. I'm your host, Jayson Gaddis, and I'm psyched to be here. This is episode 181, and we've been around a while now, and I'm appreciating you, the listener, for hanging in there and for learning, especially if you execute and you take action after each episode. Thank you. This podcast is about growth and development-oriented relationships, long-term relationships. Because we find that they can be challenging, it's good to educate yourself for this adventurous journey called partnership. So this podcast is meeting that need and giving you lots of tips and tools from relationship experts, from couples, from my wife, from a number of sources and resources, okay? So in this episode, we are sitting down with a couple who has navigated a long-term relationship successfully and is now living together. Now, so it's specifically for you if you're in a long-term relationship. We've never done an episode that is niched out like this on this topic, so I'm psyched to deliver here because I don't currently live in a long-distance relationship. I've got a series of past failed long-distance relationships under my belt, and it's not really my jam. This episode's great because there's so many valuable insights from this couple on how to navigate expectations, how to navigate text messaging at night right before you go to bed, how to set up some agreements around your partnership, and how do you move to be in the same location? Who has to give up? And do you have to give up? But there does need to be a sacrifice, according to this couple. And I really love how they articulate it and how they do it. And now they're both on the personal growth and development path. Vienna is a therapist in New York City. Her guy, Connor, runs Man Talks, is an entrepreneur and a coach. So these people know a thing or two about human behavior, and they also know a lot about themselves because they've been doing the work on themselves for a long time. Connor's been on a previous episode, 73, so I encourage you to check that out. And Vienna's got a big following on Instagram, so check her out there. But I just was honored and appreciative of interviewing these guys on how to navigate a partnership when you're living in two different cities. Okay, and if you're not in that category and you're in the same location, I still recommend listening to this because there's a lot of really good insights for your at-home relationship. If you both live in the same town, it's still going to be useful for you. Before we dive in, I just want to quickly announce our contest winners, okay? This first prize winner is a ticket to the Embracing Conflict weekend here in Boulder, Colorado. And man, this is a big price tag. This is worth $1,000. And our winner gets to come to Boulder, Colorado for a $100 deposit, is all she's paying, to embrace conflict and to learn how to do that in her life. So Nancy Fraser, what's up? I hope I pronounced that last name right. It might be Fraser, but I think it's Fraser or Fraser. Regardless, Nancy, I might have butchered your name, but I'm psyched to meet you in person here in a couple of weeks, February 9th, 10th, and 11th. And you also get to bring a friend for half price. So basically, you get the $1,000 ticket, and you get to bring a friend for $500 if you have a partner or friend in your life that wants to come, or another podcast listener, perhaps. Okay. Second prize, Trina Ayers. Trina, thank you for playing. You get $200 towards any relationship class that we teach here at the school. And you've got to use this by February 1st, okay? So congratulations, Trina. Psyched that you played and that you won. Thanks for your video. And then Kate Hart. What's up, Kate? You get $50 towards our merchandise stores to get a hat, a mug, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, a tank, okay, whatever you want. And you've also got to use that by February 1st. So congratulations to you three and everyone else who participated. Thank you. Thanks for playing. Thanks for engaging with me. We did a little contest where they had to shoot a selfie video explaining what they were triggered, what happens to them in a relationship when they get triggered, and their partner's like most annoying behavior, and what you do habitually, and then you ask a question. Okay. So these were all great videos. So thanks. And I am going to answer those questions at some point. So hang on to your bootstraps for that one. Okay, everyone else, if you want to come to the Embracing Conflict weekend, time is running out, so you want to register now. It's buy one, get one half price, okay, if you want to bring a partner or friend. And you go to relationshipschool.net/embracing conflict, because that is what we're going to do. My wife and I and so many of our students and our coaches will be there, and you, hopefully, will be there as well. If you want to change the conversation around conflict this year, this is the place to do it. This is the place in the world to do that. It's that good. Okay, let us get on with it here. Back to the episode. All right, welcome to the show, Connor and Vienna.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We're at the same time.
Jinx. We're psyched to have you guys here. Thanks for the time. And tell us, just by way of intro for the listener, just who are you both separately first?
You want to go first?
Sure. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a practice in New York City, and I work with individuals, couples, and families within the context of relationships. So it's a pretty systemic lens through which most marriage and family therapists see and work. So a lot of people who are based in Manhattan come in for therapy. I work with clients who will sometimes fly in for intensive therapy weekends if they're out of state or out of country. So we do a deep dive on particular weekends, but have wonderful collaborations in the city where I get to pull from my creative side and entrepreneur side of things and get to partner with some really incredible people out here to do some neat things.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and then I run an organization called Man Talks, and we focus predominantly on men's personal and professional development. So we focus on the pillars of purpose, of relationships, of really being what it's like to be a modern man, how to be a great father, a great husband, a great leader, and how to do all those things at the same time. So I also do a lot of one-on-one work with men. I seem to attract a lot of guys that have struggled with infidelity, guys that have have gone through it in the past, are going through it in the present, men that are looking for a sense of purpose in their life. Maybe they are already successful in their own right, but they're not really happy in that, and they're trying to transition out into something. So that's a lot of the one-on-one work that I do. And then I work a lot with groups of men. So Man Talks, we've got mastermind groups and men's groups going in Vancouver and Calgary and popping up in Toronto in May. And I run a few of those groups as well. And so it's some pretty cool stuff. And then we do some work together for the people, for the people, just for the people. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Welcome, guys. And where are you both from originally?
I'm from New Jersey originally. Somerset.
Okay.
It's a sort of central north Jersey.
And I am from northern Alberta, which is, I think I described it when I was on last as basically the Texas of Canada, except there's a ton of oil. It's a big province. There's a ton of oil, lots of big trucks, lots of cowboys. Except like 5-6 months out of the year, it's like -20. It was -48 there over Christmas when I called my parents.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. That's intense. Okay. That makes you think a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been together? Give us that.
Year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. About a year and a half.
Okay.
We just got engaged 4 months ago.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much. Yeah. And yeah.
Outstanding. And where did you guys meet? How did that go down?
So we had met sort of within the community, the Instagram community, if you will,
Wow.
but really through a mutual friend of ours. And so we had met previously, and then we wound up speaking at a conference together. And, we knew of each other, and we had been, like acquaintances, I guess, prior to that. But yeah, after that summit, a lot of
The
it really got.
sparks were flying. We
Nice. And
had
did someone ask someone out here? What happened?
initially I had been out in New York one time, and we had like met, me and her and one of her friends, and we had all gone out for, steaks and beer. And I didn't really think anything of it, because I was, kind of crazy with work, and I was so focused on work that I didn't think much of it. And was going from Toronto to New York to LA, and then back up to Vancouver. And when I got back to Vancouver, our mutual friend Mark, who you've had on the podcast, Mark
Oh, yeah,
Groves.
Mark Groves. Nice.
Yeah. So we technically kind of met through Mark. And so I got back to Vancouver. He calls me and he's like, "Hey, how was your trip?" Like, because I had been gone for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And he's like, "How was your trip?" And I was like, yeah, it was really, really great. I had a lot of fun. Da 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 da. And he was like, "How was New York? How was Vienna?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it was great." Me and her and one of her friends, we went out for dinner. It was a great time. And she's super smart, really dedicated. I can tell that she's just like a rock star at what she does. And he's like, yeah. So like, could you see anything happening with her? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I'm just curious. And I was like, why, did she say something? Because like now I'm curious, right? Yeah. Now I'm curious. And he's like, no, she didn't say anything. She didn't say a thing. And little did I know, I had left New York, and can I say?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had left New York, and she had called Mark and told him about me being out in New York and the time that we had spent together, and verbatim had told him I would date the shit out of that man.
Oh, nice.
And so he was like fishing, right?
Yeah, totally.
He was fishing. And then when I heard that she was coming to speak at the conference, the day before, I think it was the day before she was coming out to Vancouver, I sent her a message and said like, "Hey, let's meet up and, grab a drink and just connect." And we hung out a little bit over the weekend, and then she went back. And at the time I was living full time in Vancouver, and she was living in New York. So we started off very long distance, 3,000 miles apart. And,
Oh, wow.
I was very interested right out the gates. And so I pursued pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, we started Skyping and FaceTiming every couple of days. And then it turned into almost every day. And then I had a trip planned out to New York, and then away we went.
Okay, cool. Vienna, would you fill in the blanks there with anything, or was that pretty good?
That was pretty good. I think the short answer is Connor asked me out, and Connor pursued me.
I did. I did, definitely.
Right, but you planted a nice seed with Mark, it sounds like.
That's
I did. I had my eye set.
Yeah.
So cool.
I was going to say, David Data says, choose women who choose you. And I think that's a pretty incredible little phrase, and it seemed to work pretty well here. So yeah. I think that she had kind of chosen me before I even started pursuing.
Yeah, well, before I even knew that I had chosen you too.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And how you guys have been together a year and a half. So some people would say, "Oh, you guys are still in the honeymoon stage." Would you guys say you are? Or are you guys in work mode? You passed the honeymoon stage, and now you're dealing with conflict and addressing stuff, or?
I mean, I think it is fast, and it's a sort of like a quick amount of time objectively, I guess, that we went from dating to engaged and sort of moving along that process. But I've always said to people who have inquired about this that, doing the long distance is a really interesting of contribution to the dynamic, because you are in a space where when you have your first date or your second date, your dates are really 2 weeks long, which was our case. And so your relationship our relationship, in my opinion, really kind of fast forwarded through quite quickly because we were spending so much time in such an intimate way right off the bat. And that was very different from sort of the dating world, at least here in New York, where, you know, people will joke, and it's not funny, but people will joke how, you know, you will have a date, which is maybe a coffee date or a drink date or a dinner date if you're lucky. And then maybe the week next or 2 weeks from then, you'll see that person again for another 2 hours. And then, you know, 2 weeks after that, maybe you'll see them again. And so for us, it felt like we really were sort of dumped into this space that demanded a lot of vulnerability, that demanded a lot of intimacy right from the get-go. And it wasn't really something that was super easy right off the bat. You know, there was a lot of things that we had to move through and challenge and confront. And then on top of that, there were the constraints of being far away and having to really explore expectations and agreements that we had around what our relationship would look like, what those boundaries were, you know, how often we would be seeing each other, what that would look like, setting the next time when we would see each other. And again, not that those are things that create a tremendous amount of trauma or hardship, but certainly right off the bat, I think we were having to dive into certain things that created a lot of challenge for us.
Yeah, I think I would just add there that, you know, both of us have done a lot of work around relationships, and I think we both kind of identified right pretty early on that this was going to be something serious. And I think the distance also demands that. I think that there's something about long distance that requires a certain amount of like relational maturity, or it very clearly points out that maybe you don't have that relational maturity because all of a sudden you're confronted with being removed from the relationship. And so normal behaviors around dependency, or, you know, how you would normally act when you first start dating somebody is completely different. Because, you know, if you live in the same city as somebody, you know, in New York, it might be that you see somebody, you know, once every couple of weeks just because people are busy, and, you know, that's how it works here. But in other cities, you know, if you're in a small town, the likelihood that you could see that person almost on a daily basis right out the get-go and have an incredibly fast-paced relationship right out the gates is very probable. And so I think that we still have a sensation of honeymoon, but there definitely has been a much more and a much faster sense of needing to be mature, like relationally mature within the context of our relationship, because that's what it demanded of us right out the gates. You know, I had a business in Vancouver, and so I take that into account. I had people that work for me in Vancouver. And so there was a lot to sort of juggle and balance when we first started dating, in terms of I was traveling a lot. And so I had to like map out my month and my coming months and really like fit it all in. And so it was really interesting right out the gates. And dating a therapist comes with a whole other bag of tricks.
Oh yeah,
you can't get away with anything.
Yeah,
No,
I'm married to one, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
it really demanded that we relied heavily on emotional intimacy and communication, because it wasn't just being able to go out and do fun things together and connect on that level, which I think often is what happens when you're first dating someone. You're having these new experiences together, and trying to create that through a computer screen is quite different. And it does rely heavily on your capacity to kind of go deep and expand yourself in different ways. And so yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of kind of real life stuff that has happened, and
definitely.
Sort of we're in the throes of all of that. But yeah, I still like him a lot.
Nice. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
So you've had to collaborate. Obviously, workout challenges, scheduling is definitely huge these days, especially for a long distance couple. Would you what's one tip you guys both have for a long distance relationship? Because there's a lot of listeners that have that long distance relationship? Like like one tip that would make it a successful experience, because that I know has got its own set of challenges.
Yeah, I think one that we were really good about was putting voice to our expectations and agreements that we had of each other. We talk a lot about covert agreements, which are sort of these unspoken expectations and agreements that we have of our partners within the context of relationships. We had them with friends and family too. And I think it's where a lot of letdown and disconnect can happen in that space when you're not actually putting voice to what those agreements are. And I think we were pretty clear right off the bat of like, this is what I expect, or this is what I hope for. I guess expect sounds a little rigid, but you know, it is sort of putting voice to what those expectations are and what it is that we need in order to feel like we have a smooth thing going. And so being able to voice that without fear of judgment or concern that it was too much or too little or whatever you could add to that was really freeing, and I think put us on the same page right off the bat. So I think if I was giving one tip for any relationship, not necessarily long distance relationships, but any relationship, is the courage to move out those expectations and put voice to them. Because it's where the boundaries come. It's where we are honoring what it is that we need in order to feel safe and secure, while also listening to our partner to hear what it is that they require. So I think we did a good job of that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would add, you know, for the tip, I would probably add own your communication needs. And you know, I think I was looking it up, but I think something around 10% of marriages actually start in long distance. So it is something that, you know, 1 out of every 10 marriages starts in a long distance. It might not be 3,000 miles, but you know, it does happen frequently. And I think the key to it is really being able to own the level and the type of communication that you actually need. Because in a long distance relationship, that is paramount, especially when you're starting off, to be able to say, you know, this is when I can communicate, and to be able to prioritize communication. I think it's really important because, you know, we were lucky when we first started because we both really enjoyed talking to each other and connecting. And so it was a natural priority. And, you know, as soon as things became more and more busy, we really had to make a conscious choice to say like, okay, what do we need from communication? Is it a daily basis? Do we, you know, is FaceTime going to work better, or Skype? You know, are we going to just have a call and check in? What's that going to look like? And to be able to own that part is extremely important and helpful, because otherwise, and be open to what your partner needs. Because what you need in long distance might not be anything near what your partner needs to feel connected and supported and seen and heard. And that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have to work something out there where you had different communication needs or expectations? Do you mind sharing one of those if you did?
There were a lot of similar ones. Probably Connor is a words of affirmation person, and I'm not, or certainly not like to the extent to which you are.
She's got the self words of affirmation.
Okay. We're talking love languages, right?
So, you know, shifting, I'm sure you're familiar, and probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with the 5 love languages, Gary Chapman's research there. But I think for us, kind of off the bat, having an understanding around each other's love languages, we share in physical touch is one of our primary ones. And then my other one is quality time, and Connor's follow-up is words of affirmation. And so being able to speak that language, and so he would need and still needs to hear from me in that way, to affirm the things that he's doing or who he is, and just as a partner, as a man. And so that was something that I had to shift into a little bit more. And you know, it's really interesting because you have to really check the judgments that you have about those types of things. Like, well, how do I judge someone who needs to feel loved through words of affirmation. And it's so interesting because we can look at these things and say, oh, these are all beautiful things, gifts, words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and see why people would like those things. And yet I think we all can hold judgments around certain ones that aren't ours.
Oh, yeah.
And so to accept that I have a partner who wants to be affirmed in that way was something that I had to shift into. I wouldn't say it was a terribly difficult thing. It's just something that I do need to remind myself of still from time to time, and Connor reminds me of it as well. But in terms of just sort of expectations that were slightly different. But like Connor said, we are two people who really enjoy speaking in general. Yeah. And we also like speaking to each other. And we both are sort of emotional beings and have the language to share and be vulnerable with one another. So it was, I don't know. I think it was kind of
like one of the shifts that on my side as well, like you were talking about, the 5 love languages was, one of Vienna's is around quality time and like being a priority in that space. And so it was important that we had these like guidelines, or, it was pretty apparent early on that like a very simple example was sending her a message before I went to bed at night. So because she was 3 hours ahead, she would go to bed much earlier than me. And then she would also wake up at like 6 a.m. in the morning here, which is like 3 a.m. Vancouver time. Yeah. And so just like, you sending a message before bed, connecting that way so that when she woke up, she felt prioritized. And that was definitely a shift, because normally before I go to bed, I'm like in my own space, I'm like totally recapping the day and not in the space of necessarily like relationship all the time. And so that was an adjustment that I had to make on my side as well. But those two adjustments really helped us to connect and like keep the connection going from a long distance space.
But see, you didn't see that or code that as threatening to your freedom, which is something, when we think about, different relationships, whether it's relationships that we've had or just relationships out there, like you think about these things, these emotional needs that we have, or these requests or these expectations or these agreements, and how when a person pushes back on something that we ask for, why you look to them to explore like, well, what about what I'm asking for is threatening to you, right? Because there's this risk that I had found with maybe past partners when I might request something like, hey, like shoot me a message before you go to bed, which again, objectively is pretty simple and straightforward and isn't asking too much. And yet a response from someone else was, or maybe like, well, I've never needed to do that for someone else. Or
what's the big deal? And I shouldn't have to like make you feel better.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that defensive-ness was not something that I think either one of us ever met the other with, right? I think we do a really good job of being open and not going immediately to a space of like risk and threat, but rather prioritizing the other person to understand like why that's important to them, even if it shifts us out of something that is normal for us or something that gives us freedom, which could have been the threat to you. Like you don't have the freedom anymore to just do whatever you want to do. But
messing up my evening or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Which is absurd, by the way.
Agreed. But
right? Like there's a part of me that like wants to dive into that and be like, how could something like that mess up? It's a 3-second text message.
Routines. We got routines. Right?
Routines, man. And it's like, if you're going to encroach upon my space, man, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Especially if you're a very routine individual, that could be a trigger point.
Hey, everybody. Quick interruption from our sponsor, The Relationship School. Did you know that people's lives are changing every month in the relationship school, and their relationships are improving for the better? When you invest in yourself in a 9-month training, I guarantee you're going to come out the other side different. All right. Last week, we aired an episode with people who've been in the training. Here's a quick reminder from Catherine, who is halfway through the Deeper DPIR training.
Whether you're in a relationship or not, this is more than just an intimate relationship course. It has helped with work. It has helped with my family. It has helped with my friends. It helps in every area of your life. But to any listener, if you are on the fence, I can't even put into words. I'm tearing up a little bit. It has absolutely turned my life around 180. And I have hope.
Boom. She's got hope, and she is evolving as we speak, folks. And it's unbelievable and so inspiring to witness these people like Catherine changing and growing before my eyes. So come play with us. Come hang out. Doors close extremely soon. We start January 31st, so you're running out of time here if you are on the fence. And we'd love to see you in there. There's still room. Go to relationshipschool.net/DPIR if you want to find out more or register. All right, back to Connor and Vienna. Let's just talk about the defensive couple for a minute. Like one partner, let's say they're in a long distance relationship and they understand enough of the 5 love languages at a basic level to say, hey, actually I have a need, words of affirmation, or I need quality time or whatever. I need you to text me before bed. And the other person does have a reaction. What's supposed to happen next? What do you recommend people do next?
Well, it depends on their emotional awareness and sort of their capacity to be self-reflective and sort of explore that space. But if you're working with someone who has a little bit of that at least, it would be wise to explore where that reactivity is coming from. And so, as I mentioned before, I'm a marriage and family therapist. And so a lot of my work has us dive back into our family systems and understanding the role that we had within our family system, the relationships that we were a part of, what we saw, the messages that were both kind of direct, explicit versus explicit. And really, sorry?
Implicit.
What did I say?
Explicit and explicit.
Oh, explicit and implicit. Good thing that you're here.
I got you.
Looking out for
and really understanding the sort of the story that we tell ourselves in relation to what's being asked of us. Yeah. And so I would challenge people to kind of dive into that space to understand what is it that I'm actually needing to defend right now, because obviously there is something that's coding as a threat. Yeah. And it maybe feels intrusive, or maybe it's reminding you of a story that you can never get it right or you can't do it well enough.
It's a big one for guys. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if they're face to face with failure, when they're just asked a question right off the bat, we want to dive into that space and understand what about their story is having them code this experience as a possibility or potential for failure, right? Yeah. Because there is a risk there. And when we can start to unpack what the risk and the threat is and see whether or not it's actually valid within the context of what's happening versus the context of what has happened, that can start to shift. Yeah, huge difference. But the system codes it very similarly. Yeah. Right? So it is the same. So when we can start to shift and move some of that conversation outwards, then we create compassion for the partner, right? So they start to understand why their partner is struggling with this. And it's not that they just want to defend and they don't care and love us. So we do create the compassion there for the partner. And we also help the individual start to reflect and connect some of the dots. And potentially the hope would be that they would then unpack that and start to choose differently to write a new story and have a new outcome.
Yeah, I love it. And it sounds kind of ideal if I'm a defensive person. So if I'm like, what do you say if I'm like, yeah, my past was fine. That's annoying. Like I shouldn't have to like reassure you at night. How do you deal with me?
Yeah. Well, do you want to answer that?
You sound like you got something. Keep on your roll.
No, it's not that I have something. It's just that, I do work with clients who are super defensive and who don't want to look at their past and who think it's bullshit and say
my past was great. I had a great family.
Yeah, I had a great family. They're really, really good at rationalizing and intellectualizing what's happened. They really don't like the idea that something from their past is still controlling them today. Yeah. And really what I find, at least as a therapist, is that when a person is meeting me with that still, it means that our relationship isn't strong enough. and that the trust and the level of understanding that I need to have in order for that person to start bringing down their walls isn't there yet. And sometimes that can take weeks or months. It's sometimes I've worked with clients for, over a year, and then at a point they'll reveal something to me that is a huge component to their story. And it's been, over a year before that's been brought out. And, what's tried and true is that it's the relationship and the sense of understanding that really must precede them knocking down some of those walls, shifting.
I think the piece that I would add is, from the masculine side, we do want to win. And so when we feel like we aren't winning, and we feel like we're failing in some way, shape, or form, we will get defensive, or the masculine part of us, the masculine essence or energy within us will get defensive. And what I usually like to ask guys is, what are you prioritizing that's not the relationship? Because in a lot of ways, when they get defensive, there's something that they have prioritized as more important, or that they've coded or internalized as more important in that space. And that's what their partner is actually feeling, is that, oh, well, you don't want to do this because in a past relationship, you didn't have to do that. And now I'm not a priority. And so being able to start to understand, like, what is the priority in that space? Like, what are you protecting? What priority are you protecting? Are you protecting your sense of freedom? Are you protecting your ability to provide? Are you protecting, do you think that you're protecting your partner from something? Are you protecting yourself from codependency, which might be a past pattern that was in your upbringing, your home environment? So starting to really get clear on what are you prioritizing instead of your partner or instead of the relationship right now, because that can be the access point sometimes for people to really start to see the crap, the coding that's running the show. When they sometimes can't see it and they're in their very defensive position.
Yeah, I like that. So to kind of summarize a little bit, what I got from both of you there was, if I'm really defensive, I may not feel safe enough, right, to let down my wall. And I might be protecting something or prioritizing something more than the relationship, right?
And that could be completely unconscious.
Yeah.
What we're prioritizing could be completely unconscious, or what we're trying to protect oftentimes is in the shadow, right? It's hidden from our view.
Yeah, totally. Nice. That's really helpful, especially I think in the context of any relationship, really. But I like, for some reason, I'm focusing on this long distance relationship with you too, because you seem to be doing it well. Are you now stationary in the same place, or are you still both? Connor, are you still living in two places, or?
I still have my place in Vancouver. I'm spending the bulk of my time here in New York. But for example, soon I'm going to be heading back to Vancouver for a couple of weeks, and I'll be in Vancouver, and then I'll be here for quite a bit longer, and I've got some travel and whatnot. So I think it'll be shifting soon so that I'll be here full time. I have to figure out the logistics of, visas or residency or whatever that hellish nightmare.
Being Canadian in Vienna, you're American?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So figuring out those logistics, but for the most part, we're here.
Yeah.
Cool. What kind of impact does that have on your relationship, that it's starting to feel like, from over here, it's starting to feel like you're both prioritizing the relationship such that you want to be in the same place, versus a couple who might continue the long distance thing and try to make it work? Can you guys speak to that?
Yeah. So, I would just start by saying, for me, I think it's challenging for a lot of guys. Relationships can be sometimes perceived as encroaching in on our freedom or as encroaching in on our purpose. And so for me, I really looked at the relationship as a vehicle for my own growth and transformation. And so knowing that if I prioritize that, it doesn't mean that I have to give up on my purpose in life. It doesn't mean I have to give up on my direction or my vision of what I want to build and my success, but that I could actually not use the relationship, but lean into that space of discomfort and fear. Yeah. And lean into that insecurity as a clear path for growth, because in every obstacle, there is a lesson for us to learn. Yeah. And so for me, this shift, while it's been challenging, from a figuring out the business standpoint and some of these other components, it really has been a vehicle for me to step in to myself and my strength and my gifts and my capacity in a much deeper way. Is that answering your question? I feel like maybe I meandered a little bit off.
No,
of course.
What I'm getting from you is that you started to see that prioritizing the relationship with Vienna and actually being closer to her in the same location is actually going to help your success, help your business, help your mission, as opposed to it's in the way somehow.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And when we can reframe it from that space, not that I give up my purpose in life, not that I give up on the things that are incredibly important to me to be in the relationship, but I let my relationship amplify those parts. I let my relationship amplify my purpose, amplify my mission, amplify what I want, who I want to be in the world, and see it as an opportunity for growth. And because of that, it has this incredible ripple effect that allows for all parts of my life to shift and grow because of it.
Yeah, cool. And Vienna, what about you? Would you add anything to your take on this in terms of being together versus trying to make a long distance relationship work?
Yeah, well, I have to hand it over to Connor a little bit more than handing it over to me, just because he's really been the one who has had to do a lot of the shifting and challenging the individual self in that space, and exactly what he's described. I have been able to stay put, and my life really hasn't had to shift too much. My business is here in the same way that Connor's business is and was in Vancouver. He did have a little bit more flexibility than I did, which I think is part of what drew that shift in from him more than it demanded it from me. But I do have to say, this has really been mostly him challenging those parts and finding the purpose and the push that the relationship was going to provide, and kind of crack through any of the constraints that would want to keep him from kind of being here and sort of surrendering. I think is really what he was describing, is surrendering to it and seeing. I know you use the word amplify, but I think, Jayson, you said utilizing the relationship to sort of push through, which we actually have seen happen within the context of your work. So yeah, I mean, in terms of me, I don't know. It really hasn't demanded so much of me, I guess, to speak on the point of us being really busy people. And so when we have been apart, it hasn't been something that has, what would you say? I just don't find it to be super difficult and challenging.
It seems like you're both kind of on a mission. You both have really fulfilling work you do, right? It's not like sitting around waiting for the person to come home.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think it's we took a certain level of practicality to it. We really looked at both of our lives separately and looked at how we wanted to create the relationship and what that would actually require of us. Yeah. Because there was a certain amount of sacrifice that had to happen, either from a practical sense, either Vienna was going to have to look at what she was going to do with her practice here in New York, whether that was selling it, whether it was taking less clients, whatever that looked like, and be in Vancouver, or I had to look at, what that would look like for me to be in New York full time. Because I do think that at some point, I'm sure that there's a few couples out there that, can do long distance and never feel the need to be together. But I feel like that's few and far between. I feel like the ultimate goal for long distance couples is to eventually be in the same place. Right. And so there almost needs to be this practical look at it, and the realization that there is going to be some sacrifice, that somebody's going to have to lean into discomfort of uprooting what they already know, what they've already built, and not holding a resentment towards the other person for choosing to go towards them. And I think that that's the challenging part that it can be. I think it's a challenging part that a lot of long distance couples falter in, because it's almost like two people are stuck in their ways. Nobody wants to change. And that's where a lot of the challenge comes from, is that no one's really willing to give up who they've been in their city, in their work, in their past life, for the chance of something different.
Yeah, and if you were moving to New York City for her first, not for yourself, you'd be resenting her, right?
Totally. Exactly. And, you know, so it was important. This has been you know, I mean, I think it's been a long process, but really it's been a year and a half, but it's been a long process of really uncovering what's my why around this. Am I just moving here to be in a relationship with Vienna because we're engaged and I, you know, want to spend my life with her? Or is there a bigger picture that I see? Does this tie into my purpose in life? Does this tie into my why and what I want to create from a work standpoint, from a being standpoint, from both the doing and the being? And that has made it exponentially easier, because there was a time and a point where I was like, oh, do I have to move here just to be with her?
Right.
Because New York is a very different city from Vancouver. And unless, you know, it's like one of those cities where either you love it and you want to live there desperately, or you're like, I don't know if I ever need that in my life. And so, you know, finding a reason outside of the relationship is extraordinarily important, because then you're not dependent on the relationship when you get there. You're not dependent on the other person to bring you into the social circles, to connect you with people, to help you build your own routines within that new space. You can start to flush those things out by yourself.
Yeah, nice. So, wow. So Vienna, there's a lot in there. So listener, I feel like that would be a little good chunk to rewind. For you, I just want to know what it feels like that your man chose you and chose to move to New York City, like to be with you. Like, I'm just curious what that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a special thing, and it's so fulfilling. And I do see the sacrifices, and I do need to always remind myself to share the gratitude, because I like everything that Connor was just saying. It's really true. It's quite threatening for either one of us, for any person out there, to think about shifting their identity in such a significant way. And I, even just kind of putting myself in his shoes, which I didn't have to do, right? I wasn't the one who was moving and sacrificing in that way, but putting myself in his shoes, I am able to really consider what it would be like to have to move and shift and start from scratch in a lot of ways. And I get it. And I get how big of a deal that is, continues to be, and was, especially because Connor really had a place in Vancouver, and was a really big part of the community there. And to move to a city where you are not that at all. Some might argue no one is ever anything here, or everybody thinks they are something here. Either way. Is really something special. And, you know, I think it's, I mean, it speaks to the love, you know. I think that if the tables were reversed and I had to do that, I would have done it also. And it did make more practical sense for us to do it this way when we really unpacked it and decided what was going to happen here. But you know, I hear you saying, like, you have to move for yourself first and not be dependent on the relationship. But obviously love was the catalyst, and the individual was the catalyst for this shift. And going back to your question, Jayson, it feels incredible. And it's really incredibly special. And it holds a message of like deep love and respect.
I'm just appreciating that. That's why I asked, because I'm like, wow, it feels like I would feel really considered, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one quick thing. You know, I think when two people are in a long distance, and then we can move on, but I think when two people are in long distance, or even if they're not in long distance, and this just speaks to like a form of sacrifice, but when two people are in long distance and they love what they're doing, where they're doing it, there is a certain process that I think might unfold a little bit more organically than if you have one party who's like, I hate where I live. I hate the job that I'm in, and you're the escape. Right. And so all of a sudden there's a very different energy in that space where one person wants to GTFO from where they are and sees the relationship as a vehicle for escaping their life. And so that can be challenging too. So that's just like a word of warning if there's people that are out there that are like, in that scenario.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that then puts it another kind of pressure on the person whose hometown it is. Like, I got this person who's like escaping, and I'm like, I'm the sanctuary supposedly, so I got to deliver here.
Yeah. And that could be any, it doesn't have to be long distance and moving cities. That could be, jobs, families, trying to escape a family and seeing the relationship as the savior and the salvation. There's many forms of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that too. Cool, guys. Well, I'm aware of the time. I didn't know we were going to go here, but it's been really enjoyable actually to see and witness a couple who's successfully navigating long distance relationship and then also successfully navigating moving to being in the same place. And I just feel like you guys are wonderful examples of a couple doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. One last part of advice from you guys to the listener, just it can be about long distance relationships or just one bit of wisdom before we stop.
Ladies first.
I really love the bit about asking ourselves what story it is that we're telling ourselves about anything in particular that's happening within the relationship, within our relationship to self. And so I would encourage people when you're in conflict, to start to change the narrative around conflict, which is a hard one because generally conflict we code as bad and negative and scary and intimidating because of the experiences we've had with it before. But I love to consider conflict as a gateway to very deep connection, closeness, and intimacy. And one of the tools and tips that I tend to offer people is to really check the story we tell ourselves. And so that would sound something like the story I'm telling myself about X, whatever it is that's happening right now, is this, and really putting voice to it and moving it out so our partners can hear the story that we're telling ourselves, because oftentimes the story we're telling ourselves is quite different from what's actually happening or the way in which our partners might be experiencing it. And so it's a really great way to create dialogue that can clear the air and can sort of shift some of the details or the facts that might be getting passed back and forth. So I guess those were two tips, really, the turning conflict into connection and intimacy, and really shifting that story by utilizing this concept of asking ourselves what story we are telling ourselves about what's happening.
Awesome.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was really good. I would just say, I'm going to botch the quote. Hopefully I don't get it too wrong. There's a great quote by Osho, and he says, your capacity to be in love is dependent on your capacity to be alone. And it's some version of that. I might have messed up a few words, but I think in terms of relationships, something that, just tying back into the long distance, but something that's really just so present about relationships in general is that they really call us to be with ourselves. And the more that we can be with ourselves, the more that we can love ourselves, feel strong in being alone, feel strong in our routines and our habits and our mindset and in our soul set and our ability to like really love and cherish who we are, the more that we can show up in the relationship and not need it to fulfill us. And I think that in this relationship, in this dynamic, and in because of whether it's because of the long distance or whether it's just because of the dynamic that we share, that has really been present for me. The more that I am with myself and I own who I am and what I love and what my gifts are in this world, the more that the relationship functions and flourishes and thrives. And I think that that's such an important message for people to remember, is that when our relationship is falling apart, it's often because we feel like we're falling apart individually and we're bringing that into the relationship. And so I would just end with that.
It's like the building blocks, right?
Yeah.
Like your couple is only as strong as the individual. Your family's only as strong as the couple. And down we go.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. It's been a treat hanging out with you both.
Thanks, Jayson.
Yeah. And where can people find out about both of you?
Well, if you're on social media, I have a strong Instagram following where I do post a lot about relationships and I write extensively there. So that's Mindful MFT, as in marriage family therapy. And then my website is newyorkcouplescounseling.com. So people who are in New York or people who want to travel here to do intensives can find me there.
Sweet.
And for me, you can go to @mantalks. That's either on Instagram or Twitter. You can go to connorbeaton.com and learn more about the work that I'm doing, or you can check out some of the work that we do through mantalks.com. We're pretty much on all the social medias.
Yeah, cool. And I suggest you guys check those guys out. I'm following them both, and they put out a ton of great content for men, women, for relationships.
And one plug for you, they can go check out your interview on the Man Talks podcast because it's absolutely incredible.
Okay, thanks, man. Cool. Yeah, it's really a treat to see you again, Connor, and to meet you, Vienna.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, great episode there on long distance relationships with Vienna and Connor. A couple action steps. One is just go check out their work. Connor, I interviewed on episode 73. That is great about his personal story and more of what Man Talks is up to, if you want to find out more there. And Vienna, definitely go check out her Instagram account, Mindful MFT, and all of her work. She's got some great quotes on there and big following. So check these folks out. All right, your action step, the kind of practical step from this episode, I want to zero in on, if you're in a long distance relationship, this is for you really, okay? Expectations, agreements, and priorities. Okay, Vienna talked about expectations and agreements, being clear with those up front. So your first action step is to do that with your long distance partner, is just say, hey, what are our actual expectations and agreements here around communication based on our needs? Do you need to talk every day? Well, I only need to talk once a week. You've got to find some middle ground there that works for both of you, all right? And they, I thought, did a marvelous job of modeling how they do it. So you can go rewind this again to figure out how do we create expectations and agreements in our relationship. And then Connor mentioned priorities. I just want to underline this again, how essential this is. In some long-distance relationships, one partner is just not prioritizing the relationship, and this can lead to insecurity and frustration in the relationship, and then you guys can fight and disagree on a number of things. But once again, you're fighting about, neither of us feel like a total priority. Maybe one of us does, but the other one doesn't. You need to both feel like a priority. And you got to behave in a way that lets your partner feel like a priority. Okay? This is big with my wife as well. So actions speak louder than words, no matter what you say. It's how you are in your behavior, all right? Cool. Now, I'm going to remind you guys, by the time this comes out, there's going to be about a week. Yeah, 1 week until you can sign up for the Deep Psychology of Intimate Relationships course. 1 week, that's it. All right? And then you have about 2 weeks total from this, when this comes out, to sign up for the Embracing Conflict weekend here in Boulder, Colorado. We've got a great crew coming from all over the world, and it should be intense and extremely fruitful for you. You're going to walk out of that weekend with way more confidence around conflict. Where else are you going to learn this? I just ask yourself, is there anyone else that I'm drawn to that's teaching a whole weekend on conflict? So come play with us at the relationship school, and I think you're going to grow. I know for a fact you're going to grow a ton, okay? So you can find out about that through our site, relationshipschool.net/embracing conflict, because that's what we're going to do, is we're going to learn how to embrace conflict. You do that, and you are on your way to an awesome relationship, okay? And then if you want to get in last minute on this 9-month training we're doing, please do. You've got to apply first, though, and we need to just have a brief conversation. I need to make sure that you're really willing to make this a big priority in your life. Talk about priorities. Okay, because you will come out that 9 months a completely altered human being and way more mature than when you came in. relationshipschool.net/DPIR if you want to hang with us there. Okay. All right, folks. Looking forward to connecting with you soon.